Yeah, I think it is 8, and we'll start. Whoever joins in is fine, but this is getting recorded. And later on, I do put it on the website, and we can, whoever wants to see it can see it later on. So, whoever has attended my last presentations, we did go through most of the stuff of how, after the flood, Noah and his sons, they literally become gods. And this presentation is shown on how his influence and his children and his grandchildren actually became gods throughout different countries. And the first page, basically, I'm showing is the Puru and the Kuru tribes. They come from Japheth and Shem, and what is called as the Pandavas and the Kaura-vas later on. And we will come to that later on. But this is what is this picture showing up the Puru tribes and the Kuru tribes. Today we will go through some of the topics here. Is Shem's and Japheth's tribes in India. We won't get much into that because we have already discussed that in the previous presentations. And we will go through this a little bit on Ham, Semiramis, and Dionysus' invasion of India. The other chapters we cover today is Noah's children in Mesopotamia, his children in Greek, his children in Persia, China, Egypt, and India. When you go through these slides, you will realize how the influence of his sons created the religions in these countries, basically. I just wanted to show a image of a representation before we go on through all the slides, because most of the folks will get confused when I talk about some his sons who had huge status. They were like giants. This is an illustration of when God created Adam. Adam was about 15 feet high. And now this is not a fairy tale. You see, the dinosaurs were also about 15 feet and 20 feet, most of them. It was not a big thing. If you compare to on the right hand side, if you see the modern man, it's about 6 feet, and an elephant is about 10 feet. It's nothing very unnatural for us to see an elephant at 10 and 11 feet today. The same thing was with Adam and his time, when there were the dinosaurs and all the creatures which God created at that time after during his creation. It was due to also the way the earth was at that time. Basically, it was full of oxygen. Our genes were fresh. There were no diseases, and that's the reason Adam had a huge height. Basically, pre-flood, most of the men were at this size, and that's the reason the Bible also says that in those days there were giants on this planet. Then you see that Noah, when it comes to Noah's time, Noah is also a little bit shorter, but Noah was also close to about 7 to 8 feet to 10 feet. There is a video made by, I forgot his name, Ron Wyatt. Yes. He finds a thumbnail of Noah where Noah was buried near the mountains of Ararat. And that is a huge bone. I did not show the photograph of that bone in this presentation, but I can in some later presentation. It's on the video, it's on the YouTube too. You can see that. I just want,
Glad, glad is that is just because it's natural, like all the people are kind of that is a normal size, or is
it
it
is because
is it few like that?
this is because you have to understand before the flood how the universe was created. It was a perfect world. That's also shown in the Bible. The oxygen level was very high, and that's the reason you see it in fossils. Everything is very huge in those days. Your dragonfly was huge. Just a minute. Your dragonfly was huge. Dinosaurs were huge. Claws were huge. It was all because of the extra oxygen in the air at that time. The earth was totally in a perfect world. God created it. And then slowly after the flood, our genes started deteriorating, and God punished us by saying that I will not, my soul will not be with man forever, that we shall live only for 120 years. And that's what is said in one of the statements. Someone's microphone is on. If you can just close it. I think Ravi, yours, and Lester, your microphones are on.
Okay.
I just wanted to show this slide as just so that what I'm showing later on doesn't become a confusion. Today we are at 6 feet, but when God created us, everything was 15 feet and above. The Bible too tells that the giants of Anak in the Bible, when Moses enters the kingdom of Canaan, they seen people as huge as 30 feet and all that. It's written in the 32 feet is the one which is written in the Bible. My next slide is on the proof. Little bit, I'll just run through it. We have a lot of people saying that the ark never existed, but these are some of the proof which are written by historians and philosophers during the Greek time. Here we say this, I read it that in Egypt, the ship of Isis was called Baris. According to Nicholas of Damascus, he was a Greek historian, diplomat, and philosopher who lived during the Augustan age of Roman Empire. And Herod was during Jesus' time, writes that Baris is the name of the mountain on which the ark rested in Armenia. The mythological god Isis is connected with the ark of Noah. Now you get it how the Isis is an Egyptian god, remember, and we'll come to that in the next slides. Basically, all these names were of Noah and his sons. That's what I'm trying to say here. And then you see the next line, Berosus. Berosus is also a writer during the first century, first or second BC. And he mentions that the ancient people used scrapping from the ark's asphalt as charms. That means they used to, till that time, the ark was visible. And till the time of Josephus, even Josephus writes that the ark was visible. Those time people used to go as pilgrimage to the Mount of Ararat, and they used to collect samples of the wood and the asphalts. That's what he mentions here. The Bible says that the ark was sealed with coating in and out, and that's the asphalt which they used to collect. Theophilus was another writer. He said that the ark was visible in the day of the mountains of Armenia. The Bible says that the ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. So you see, Theophilus also mentions it. There's another writer called Chrysostom. He's also a Greek writer. Says the remains of the ark were preserved in the mountains of Armenia in his time. That means there are people telling that when they lived, the ark existed. Today there is no proof of the ark. The ark has just disappeared. Jacob Barrett is basically a recent writer, and he too writes of how the gods mentioned in Egyptian like Sesostris was Osiris. You see, these gods of Egypt, I'll come to that slide, you'll get the confusion. They were known by different names. Some the Egyptians call them Osiris, the Greeks call them Dionysus, the Meneses. Meneses was also called by Egyptians, but he was all Noah. You see, he's called Sethius by the other people. The word Zeus, according to Bryant, is associated with the making of wine, and everyone knows that the first person to make wine was Noah. He planted the grapevines after the flood. Byron also tells us of Sethios building a ship which is 280 cubic long, dedicated to Osiris at Thebes. This is the most remote island in the part of Egypt where it's made no sense to build a ship. That means this story is the story of Noah, but it's in the Egyptian context. And we will see later on why it comes in the Egyptian context. Below, I just give a statement there that the people who lived a long lifespan might have been considered immortal, possessing a godlike quality. And that's the reason some people took them as gods, because you see, they came from the sea. The 8 people came from the sea. And they were huge and they lived long years. Imagine today, if someone comes out just from the sea, we'll call them aliens. Already the US government is confused of seeing things flying in and out. You see, at those days when they seen these people 15 feet, 12 feet, and they lived for 500 years. They considered them as gods. We too would have been confused if we would have, we have read the Bible. We got things to read today. We have got the internet, so we may not believe. But in those days, all this was not there. So those people thought that these were really gods. Here's, I have put a chart here of how Noah, his wife, Ham, Rhea, Mizraim, Dionysus, Shem, and Japheth, I've just taken these names, how they were known by different people and different areas. At the first column, you see Berosus, Holished, and Lech. These are all Greek writers, and they call Noah with different names. You see the first column which says Ogesis. He was a mighty sacrifice. He was known, they call him with that name. They call him with Arsa, the sun, and Janus. Janus is a very famous one. This is the first god which had two heads. The concept of a god having two side heads, three-sided, actually it's three-sided. The three-sided head was first with Janus. People of India can very well, tie it up with our Indian gods of Brahma and all that. And I will surely come to all that as to from where did they get all these ideas from. The Egyptians called Noah as Shu. The Greeks call him as Uranus. The Romans call him as Janus. And in India, he was known as Manu. He was also called Nu and Rishabhadeva. We'll come to that later on as to how these things connect. Nu is on the Islamic side. Manu is on the Hindu side. Rishabhadeva is on the Jainism side. Now, the wife of Noah was known as Tithia, and she was called by various names by the Greek writers. But in Egypt, she was known as Tefnet, and the wife was Shu. In Greece, she was known as Gia, and Rome, Terra. And remember, in India, she was called Gayatri. The name Gayatri comes from Gia, Mother Earth, wife of Noah. The Ham, son of Noah. You remember some of these names because when we go through the other slides, all these names will appear and you'll get very confused. You don't have to by heart them, but just try to remember. Ham, the son of Noah, was known as Pan, Quam in Hebrew. And in Egypt, he was known as Geb. Geb means earth. Son of Shu. Remember who's Shu? The wife of Noah. And Tefnet. In Greece, he was called Cronus, the son of Uranus and Gia. In Rome, he was called Saturnus. And in India, he was called Kamadeva, and Bahubali, basically. Then we have the wife of Ham, who was called Rhea. She was also called with different names, and she was initially the wife of Hammon and left him because he had an adulterous relation with Elamethea and married her brother Ham. So Ham was her brother, basically. In Egypt, she was known as Nut. And in Greece, she was called Rhea, the wife of Cronus. In India, she was called Rati. Mizraim is the grandson of, grandson of Noah. He was the son of Ham. He was called Osiris, the son of Ham and Rhea. In Egypt, he was called Osiris, son of Geb and Nut. And in Greece, he was called Zeus.
Okay.
In Rome, he was called Jove, the son of Satan. And in India, I'm hearing someone here. Who's this? Okay. In India, he was called. Who's that? Okay. In India, Mizraim was known as Zeus, was Indra, and in the Egyptian, he was the Egyptian kingdom of Mizraim. That Mizraim is the one who actually formed Egypt with Ham, his father. So that's the reason we have the name Misr. That was the old name for Egypt. And I will also connect and show you what the Indians used to call the people of Egypt.
Just intake, yeah.
Then we have Dionysus, the son of Hammon. And I'll come later. I did not put Hammon here because the list will go quite long. Then we have Shem. Shem was also known as Marduk by the Syrians. And in India was known as Bharat, and his great grandson was Ophir. Ophir was the one who basically formed India. Now we are very confused. The historians are very confused whether Ophir, because Solomon mentions Ophir's name.
Yeah.
Kishori, your microphone is on. Okay. Kishori, you can hear me? Your microphone is on, please.
Come with me.
Underneath over there.
Then we have Japheth. Japheth was known in Greece as Lapithus, Odin. In Rome, he was called Jupiter. And India, most probably, he was Prajapati. So this is how throughout the world his sons were known as. I just wanted to keep in this that so that we get a fair idea when you go through the slides. Here I just give a brief description of his sons. Basically, the Ham, the four sons of his, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Canaan ruled basically the side of Syria, Israel, and also Egypt. And Cush's son went to Ethiopia. Ethiopia is basically the word Ethiopia comes from Cush's grandson called Ethiop, and that's the reason that area was called Ethiopia. And this side, which is called Ethiopia and Nubia, later on I will explain to how they had a tribe called the Nagas, or called the Nakash, and that's how the Naga dynasty started, and we'll come to that later on, but that's how it is from Ethiopia. And below I write that the most prominent descendant of Ham was Nimrod, the founder of Babel, as well as Erech, Akkad, and Calneh. This is the cities Nimrod found. I just go through Shem through his sons, Elam, Ashur. Just remember the name Ashur because we'll come to that slide later on. Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram, but we'll concentrate on Ashur later on. I am not going through all of this, and I can give these slides to anyone who wants to read through them. If I go through them individually, it will take a lot of time because I've got a lot of slides to go through. If there is something important in this, I will go just read through it. There is one interesting thing which I would like to read here to note that the word Aryan, which is so fascinated Adolf Hitler, is a form of the word Iran, but the word Aryan.
No, what Gladys uncle is presenting on history of Noah had a sons in Dermale. Noah's sons, some of his sons.
Hey, Gladys,
who went to India.
first I think you can mute everybody else.
Oh, okay.
Am I muted?
No, yeah, you can be.
Okay. So I've just gone through this slide. Anyone who needs the slides can ask me and I'll send it to them. I was just going through that the word Aryan. The very term Aryan signifies a mixed line of Shemites and the Japhites, basically. Mostly the Aryans are Iranians, and we will cover that subject when we are covering the Indian side. And that may not be in this presentation, but I'll get to those slides later on. And here I cover Japheth. Japheth had most of the sons who covered Europe. Basically, Gomer is the most important one. We got to just concentrate on Gomer. Then we have Madai and Mesech, who's the last one. We have to concentrate on these one because these cover our Indian sector. And here in the last line, I say on Mesech, to this day, one section, the Mesech lowland, still carries the name of Mesech, virtually unchanged by the ages. Indians call foreigners as Merachis. If you read the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, you will realize that the word Merachi comes a lot in that. Anyone who is a foreigner in India was called as a Marathi by the Indians at that time. It was because of this person. And he was the one who formed Moscow, what we call present-day Moscow. I think I did cover Semiramis in the previous presentations. Semiramis, known as Samu Ramat at the top, is a semi-divine warrior queen of Assyria. Now, history doesn't record her, but many of the Greek writers have mentioned her name. One of it is Critias, who's a 5th century BC writer. He mentions her. And Diodorus, who basically copied most of Critias's work, he also writes in the Bibliotheca Historica Diodorus. That's his book, basically. And I did take some things here from these books in my presentation, and I'll show that from which books I have taken. She was the original inspiration for all queen worship. She was also known as Istara, Athena in Greek, Devi in Buddhism and Hinduism. She invaded India and was successful. The details of her invasion is described in the book written by Critias of Cynodus. Her battle information is given in great detail in this book of how she challenged the armies of the Indian rulers at that time at the Battle of Hadapus. At that time, when she invaded in India, there was a king, and basically that king, history has got that king wrong, because the king which is mentioned in the Biblicata Historia doesn't match with the king list which we have today. Basically, I have that name somewhere. I'll got to look at it. This is the image of she. This is a AI generated image of her. This is not any real message. Now, the image of Semiramis riding a tiger is copied later as the Hindu gods in the 18th century AD by Raja Ravi Verma. Now, Raja Ravi Verma was a painter in Kerala. Today you will know that many people who are from Kerala will know that there is a Raja Verma paintings and all that. He was a printer at that time. He did roam all across India. And remember that till the late 18th century, there were no images of Shiva and all the Hindu gods. There was no images. Very rarely there were images. There were stone statues were only carved by Buddhists in India. It is later in the 17th century that Hindus started carving, stealing those images of Buddhism and then making them their own. But there were no pictures. The pictures were first created by this Raja Ravi Verma of Kerala, who toured India and copied some of the Buddhist Assyrian sculptures, and he made these stories and these pictures of their gods sitting on tigers and all that. So this is basically the image of Semiramis, who basically invades India on a tiger. Here, the last line, I forgot the king's name. It was Strababoutis. This is the king's name which is mentioned in the book, in the Greek books. But when you compare it with Indian history, they say it was Supratika, who was a Buddhist king. But I personally don't think Supratika, this king, was at the time when Semiramis attacked India, because she was way before at 2000 to 2500 BC. And Supratika and all were Buddhist kings who are only close to 500, 600 BC. So it doesn't match basically. But this is the name which is given in the books. Strababoutis. This is the king she basically went to war with of India. So we don't know who's this. It sounds like a Greek name. And of course, the northern part of India was Greek at that time. And I'll come to that India was not India. It was not a country. It was a land which was ruled by many kings, and it was not a unified kingdom. So when historians of Indian historians tell us India and Bharat, they are all lying. There was no united kingdom at that time, none at all. And what we are talking about, how they attacked India, was basically northern India, which is called today Afghanistan, and it goes up to modern day Uzbekistan, which is Bactria and all that. That's the place which is mentioned where all these things happened. And it is not in India. It is where the Indus Valley civilization was, and I'll come to that too. Here I have a slide of Dionysus coming to India. This is also mentioned in the Greek books. The Indian stubbornly, here the story of Dionysus begins with Zeus, leader of the Greek gods, ordering Dionysus to travel to India. Remember who was Zeus in my chart? So connect that with that. Don't connect it with the Greek gods. Who was Zeus? It was Ham. ordering Dionysus to travel to, basically he comes against Ham, but oh, Zeus was not Ham, sorry, I have to look at this. The Indians stubbornly prefer their ancestral god of fire and water. First, till they refused to drink wine. Zeus was worshipped by the Buddhists as Vajrapani and later by the Hindus as Indra, the one with the lightning rod, the god of rain. Dionysus comes to India in search of Ham since he killed his father Hammond in Italy. Now, Hammond is the name called Ammon also. In Egyptians, they call it Ammon, the god Amun. Basically, that is Hammond. Sorry. And I presume in India, this name was called Hemant, but I'm not sure about that. But this is from where the name Hemant comes from. And here I've given a brief history of how he comes to kill Ham and Ham retreats to Bactria. Now, Bactria is in modern day Uzbekistan. That area is known as Bactria. And those days it was ruled by the Mauryans and the Kushans those days. And we will come to that as to what they worshipped. You will get a surprise as to the gods, what the Mauryans worshipped today became also Shiva. It's at this time that the Zoroastrian god Azura Master's religion also come up. This is the story also. The Azura Master's story basically takes us back to 600 BC. But that's not true. There was a god which the Zoroastrians also took and worshipped, which was the Sumerian gods. And we will come to that later on. But that's what the stories were written down in 600 BC for the Zaura master, the Zaurian, the Avesta, which is the holy book of the Zoroastrians. Here I just cover about how Dionysus, this bottom one is the picture I think I showed in my previous slide of how Dionysus invades India. And this was basically a coffin found in Greece. And the coffin was so beautifully decorated with the battle scenes of Dionysus attacking India, where he's successful and he has lions, tigers with his army going in a succession rally. Basically, it's very, very beautifully carved coffin. And I just wanted to read one thing here. Alexander the Great and Mount Meru. Now, I don't know if many of you know that Mount Meru, Hindus have a calendar in which the center of their chart is called Mount Meru. In Tamil, it is called Malacca. And that's the reason you get the name Malaysia comes from the Mount Malacca. Malaya. You see, that word comes from Mount Malaya, which the Hindus call also Mount Meru. Now, here I would like to tell you from where did they copy this Mount Meru? The Nicaeans are not an Indian race, but part of those who came with Dionysus to India, possibly even of the Greeks who became the past service in the wars with Dionysus waged with Indians. Dionysus settled there together with the Greeks, called the country Nicaea. Now, when Alexander came and he was came to attack India, he came across a village, and the village people told Alexander not to attack this village because this village was formed by Dionysus, and they were all Greeks living in that village. That village was called Nicaea, from the mountain Nysa, because Nysa is the mountain where Dionysus is supposed to have been born. So it was a very sacred mountain for the Greeks. And they called it Nysa. And this Nysa is called Meras because of the incidents of Nyasa's birth. And this Meras was later on converted to Meru in the Indian, by the Hindu Brahmins when they wrote the books in the 17th century. Basically, this is the theme from where they took the stories of how to create because every religion has got a very, mountains were considered very, very auspicious in every religion. Every religion has an auspicious mountain. So during this time, the Greeks had Mount Meru as their auspicious mountain. The Hindus also wanted to create it at the time. The Brahmins who wrote the books, they created Meru at that time, and later on, remember there are two sects of Hinduism at that time: the Shivaism and the Vishnuism. The Shivaism made a mountain called Kailas, and the Vishnuism made a favorite mountain called Mount Meru. Whereas in the southern India, they considered Malaya as the main mountain, which is there even today in Tamil Nadu. So there was a lot of conflict when it comes to our Indian religious time at those times.
Glady,
Here,
Glady, is it in what? Tamil Nadu? Where is it? Like
you say Malaya is in Tamil Nadu.
no, Mount Meru. You're
Mount
saying?
Meru is near Afghanistan somewhere.
Oh,
Dionysus was born, I don't know, it was in Afghanistan or near Greek. I really don't know exactly. But it is supposed to be the mountain where the stories of Dionysus is that Dionysus was born on that mountain. So the mountain became very precious to the Greeks. And I'll tell you
okay.
this, that there is another slide. Let me come to that slide too. See, the Mount Meru, as quite common in Hindu scriptures, the religious text Kumar Purana, for instance, states that Jambudipa was the name for India in Ashoka's time. A name used in ancient sources is a reference to Greater India, lies in the middle of all the mortal realms. And I'll show you that chart too in my next slide. And it's the center is the lofty mount called Meru, bright as gold. This is the Hindu calendar of how they describe the world. You see in the middle there is Meru Mount. This is India according to the Hindu calendar. This is India called Jambu Deepa. You see the Dakshina Samundra. This is the Indian Ocean. Bhadraswadipa is the eastern side, which is where China and all this there. We have the Purva Samudra, the North Samudra, the Uttar one, the south one, the old expansion with the Ketumala. Now, is there any Tamil people in this here? How many of you have heard of Ketumala? Ketumala is also a place in Tamil Nadu side, and this is shown in the Hindu calendars basically. Now, Megasthenes is a Greek writer who wrote Indica. It's all about India, but the original Indica is lost. So the Greek other writers have taken his work because the original book of his Indica is lost. So Greek geographers took what they could from they had pieces in this. They wrote the new book called Indica, and that is available today if anyone wants to read it basically. And Megasthenes also writes about all this, describes India in his works and how people were worshipping in those days. They used to worship Dionysus, but with a different name. And he says that when he came to India, Megasthenes, he comes in the 1st century AD, and he says that there were some people called Shamanans who were actually Buddhists, and they abstained from drinking wine. Dionysus is supposed to be the god of wine, and the Shamanans were Buddhists, and they abstained from drinking wine. These are some of the old names for India. Like I said before, India was not a united kingdom in those days. Any historian tells you that India was Bharat and India was this, that's all just a face. The reason even Alexander did not go beyond when he had a war with Porus, he did not go ahead. Was one of the reasons was also this, that India was ruled by so many different kingdoms. It was not a united kingdom. So totally not a united kingdom. Now let me tell you how India was old names for India. The Sumerians called it Meluha. And Meluha did not mean India, it meant the Indus Valley. In those days, it was Indus Valley. India was totally empty, basically. We are very fortunate that we Indians are a mixture of all the sons of Ham. I mean, sons of Noah. We are a mixture of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. We have all the three tribes amalgamate into Indian population, basically. And I'll tell you how. The word Meluha comes from a rock inscription found in Sumeria. I should have put that picture. I don't know if I put it, but there they clearly mention Meluha as the place from where they traded with. And Meluha actually points to the Indus Valley. The Sumerians were trading with the Indus Valley. And in my next presentation, one of the presentations when I'm talking about India, I will show how the Indus Valley script matched with the Sumerian script. Today, everyone knows no one could read the Indus Valley scripts. No one has deciphered the scripts of the Indus Valley. We have discovered the phonetic alphabets of the Egyptians, the Sumerians, but we couldn't read the Indus Valley scripts. Even though the Hindus say that their religion is Yuga, 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 and all that, then if they were so much in the Yuga, how did they not know the language of the Indus Valley? And Indus Valley did not know Sanskrit. And that proves that Sanskrit also was not old. But anyway, that's a different discussion. The biblical names were called Hud, Huda, Ophir, and east of Ethiopia. Now, in those days, there were no much people living across the African continent. There were a few of Shem's and Japheth's tribes who were living like cavemen at those times. And all that area after Ethiopia, which was conquered by Ham and Cush, was known as East Ethiopia. There was no name at those days. During Solomon's time, Solomon mentions Ophir because he calls it the port of from where he bought gold. Remember Solomon's mines? This is the place from he bring Ophir. Ophir is supposed, there is two theories to it, whether Ophir was Indus Valley or Ophir was the southern tip point, which is today Kerala. Because Kerala did trade with the Romans. But I personally feel that the Kerala trade happened only with the Romans, and I don't think it went as far as during the time of Shem and Ophir and all that. At that time, it was too early. So I feel Ophir talks about Indus Valley. The Persians used to call it Hindustan. Now, the word Hindu doesn't mean Hindu. The Muslims used to call Kush as Hind. So they used to call it the land of Hind, the land of Kush. So that's why they used to call it Hindustan. There's a lot of confusion where people say the Arabs called it Hindustan because we were called Hindus. It was not Hindu, it was Hind. And I showed you in my previous slide as the Arab writer who first writes about the land of Hind, the land of Kush. The Mauryans and the Guptas called it Jambudipa. The Indian called it Bharat probably after the 8th century. I don't think Bharat name was there even before the 8th century, because the Buddhists never called it by the name Bharat. They called it Jambudipa. Ashoka called it Jambudipa. He didn't call it Bharat. So the word Bharat came out only after the Brahmins basically started to bring in a new religion after the Mahayana, and that I'll get into how Buddhism spread into Mahayana, Hiyana, and the Vajrayana and all that. They broke into different sectors, and how the sectors started becoming, worshipping stones, worshipping gods. Because during Buddha's time, there was no statues. There were no books. Even the Tripitaka, the book of the Buddhists, was written in the 1st or 2nd century. The British called it India, and the Kerala was called Muziris during the Roman times. Like I said, it had a port. I write below every port. Yeah.
Gladdy, I think even Hindu scriptures, right? There is a mention of Bharat, right? Bharat.
Yeah, because I will have to come to that when I have a presentation on the Indian side. You'll be surprised that most of these books were written during the Mughal Empire, the 8th to the 16th century. Between this time, there is a certificate which I've got from UNESCO, which India, see, there is no original copies of any of the Hindu books. The only copy they have is of the Rig Veda, which is in the Pune Bhandarkar Institute. They have 32 manuscripts. From that, one manuscript is on bark paper, that is bark wood. The other 31 manuscripts are on paper. And remember, when was paper invented? Paper was invented in the late 16th century to 17th century. So the earliest one was the barks written on a tree, bark tree. And when they dated it, the UNESCO gave the date as 1467. I've got also the copy of the Calcutta Gazette of 1854, where the British sent out his officers to go and collect all the religious books, and they basically bought all the religious books from Varanasi. They went to Mathura and 3, 4 places. They collected all these books, and they basically compiled the Rig Veda and all that. The Rig Veda are not transmitted to these Brahmins by default. Basically, it was the British who collected it, and I can show that Calcutta Gazette's paper also. I don't have it right now, but I'll show it at one time. If anyone needs it, I can send it to them. I've got all these collections with me. I've also got the certificate from the UNESCO where they dated the Rig Veda copy. See, Indian government sent it with great anticipation, saying that, oh, we have got a copy of the Rig Veda. Now we can say it is as old as the mountains. But when the UNESCO tested it, they said this is going. This birch wood is, you can do carbon dating on wood or anything which is organic, not on unorganic. No, you can't do carbon dating on rocks and all that. You can do only carbon dating on things which lived at one time. So they could do it on the bark wood, and they said that this bark wood is from the period of 1467. That means this Rig Veda copy what they have, and that's only 32 manuscripts. Rig Veda consists of a lot of pages, but they don't have, there's no original books of anything. And the Puranas were written basically in the 17th century. That's why they have a Allah Purana. How can a Hindu book write Allah Purana? I can show you they have a Allah Purana. They have mentioned Jesus Christ. They have mentioned the Queen of England. They have mentioned Baber. How does they know about all this? They also mentioned about flying, the Wright brothers. And that's why that confusion was there that Hindus had the technology of plane flying and all that. That all comes from these stories, basically. Anyway, we'll go to the, and below I mentioned the word Kish. The word Kish in Sanskrit means black. Now, let me tell one thing just for information. Most of you know, and I'll cover it in my for future presentation. Krishna was actually Vasudeva. That Vasudeva is a Buddhist god. They basically copied this whole story from Vasudeva's Buddhist Jatak Kathas, and they called it Krishna. Kish means Kush. Kush was from the black side of Ham. They were black people from Nubia, who basically became the Dravidians in Tamil Nadu. That's why you see Tamil Nadu and Kerala, we are all dark people. We all carry the genes. If you see the documentary, The Story of India, when they tested the genes of Indians living in Tamil Nadu and of Africans on the other side, our genes matched. You see, we are all basically, the Dravidians are all from Africa. We are all the folks from Kush and Ham, basically. So the word Kish means black, and it was an insult in those days because the Brahmins in those days wanted to insult the god of Buddha. I mean, they were not gods, they were basically stories, but it was an insulting name in those days. But later on, they made it into a full-fledged god. Here I show a picture of from the Gandhara caves in Afghanistan. Basically, all these statues are in Pakistan today. And if you look carefully, you can see this. Can you see my mouse going around, Victor? This is Buddha. And you see this man at the side here? This is Zeus. And this is Hercules. Now, these are all Greek gods. Basically, in those days, even Buddhism had a tie because there were a lot of Greeks on the border of India. And the Greeks accepted Buddhism, and Buddhism accepted the Greek gods. So there was an intermingling of these gods with them. You see, Zeus, later on, the god of lightning, the Brahmins took that figure and made him Indra. Today, you see Indra with the lightning rod is the god of rain. Basically, this all comes from here. And this all appeared during the Vajrapani time. He was called Vajrapani. Zeus was in Buddhism was called Vajrapani, basically. And there is a sect also later on, it became the Vajrapanis. and they became the what you call the tantric and the mantric people who started with magic and all that, and we'll come to that later. Here I mentioned how Ham was just mentioning Ham or how he was called in India. I mentioned that Kush, Put, Ryu. Ryu is also a son of Kush, inspired by the name Raghu in the Rig Veda. Rama. Rama is also a son of Canaan. And you see the son of Kush inspired for the name Rama, the Buddhist Jatakatha stories. Shiva was the son of Kush, is inspired for the name Shiva. Now, Shiva is also another god with the Mauryans worship, which was called Osho and Omo. Remember, there was a guy called from the Rajneesh. He was called Osho. Osho took the name from here. Basically, Osho is the name of the god, which basically later on became Shiva in Hinduism. And I will cover that surely when I'm covering the Indian side and the Buddhism in my next presentation. Now here I said that Shem and his descendants in India, they were Bharat, Narayan, Nari Narayan. The first Joktan was also a son of Shem. The area of India was given to him by Shem. In those days, there were no united India or Bharat. It was a region from Ethiopia to Asia. Ophir, the son of Joktan, he was known during the time of Solomon, and his land was the land of gold, which is modern day India. Ophir in Greek means gold. India was the land of gold in those days. The Puru and the Kuru tribes are Ophir and the sons of Japheth from the north, the Paura-vas and the Kaura-vas. In the Bible, Ophir is a region of port known for its wealth and fine gold during the time of Solomon. This is 920 BC, around that time when Solomon was taken the throne. The book of Kings and Chronicles describe a joint expedition to Ophir by King Solomon and the tyrant King Hiram that returned with large amounts of gold, precious stone, and sandalwood. Now, you should remember that two things were not found in many places, three basically: sandalwood, peacocks, and black pepper. This was only in India. If peacocks were rare, even in Africa they were there, but I think in the starting it was only in India. It was taken to Africa later on. But India was known as the land for sandalwood and peacock in those days. See, and I put the verses Kings 9:28, and they came to Ophir and fetched their gold, 420 talents, and brought it to King Solomon. Another King 10:11, the fleet of Hiram that bought gold from Ophir also bought it from Ophir, a great cargo of alum wood and precious stones. You see how many times Ophir is mentioned in the Bible. Ophir was the son of Joktan, Joktan the son of Shem. So basically, this is their relation of how they formed different countries when Noah sends his sons and grandsons to go and populate the earth, because God said after the flood, go and fill the earth. Here we have that Eber was born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in those days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan's son in the order provided in Genesis 10:26. That just gives a line of this. And later on, I'll come to one person here who is, oh, it's not here. Okay, India was the land of gold mines of Solomon, basically, in this slide. Now, Noah and his children as gods in Egypt. Like I said, Mizraim is the son of Ham, and he is the one who formed Egypt. He was the younger brother of Cush and the elder brother of Put and Canaan. His children were Ludium. He has many children. I'll not go through them. He was the ancestors of the Hamites in the Lower Egypt and Africa. Now, the Egyptians have a list of gods. This is the list. I want you to just look at it very carefully. Their first god is Atum, then Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Seth, Nephith, and Thoth, and then Horus. Now, Horus is the 11th generation from, if you count all of this, Horus is the 11th. It looks like the Egyptians confused the name of Adam as Atum. Basically, if you read the Bible, if you see the line of from Adam, Seth, and all that, the 11th person is Ham. The only thing here is they have got all the names very different. The only one is Atum. Atum is Adam. They got all this in their this language, and the Horus is Ham. basically. I showed you in that calendar. First, I said just keep an eye on the calendar. Horus is right. So basically, the Egyptians were talking of the same line of the line of Noah, but they gave them different names. They worshipped them with different names: Osiris, Isis, Seth, Nephthys, Thoth, and Osiris is 11th generation from pre-flood to the post-flood period. 9 gods of Egypt. Atum is the Egyptian paganized memory of Adam. Like I said, he is the paganized memory of Adam. Ham is most probably Horus, the sun god. Ham is also 11th from Adam in the Bible. Here he is depicted as the bull from heaven. Remember, bull worship started because he is the bull from heaven. Even Nimrod takes the bull's sign. In Exodus, they worship the bull, the golden calf. This is where the bull comes from, the bull from heaven. The story of Gilgamesh, also the bull comes. Enki fights with the bull from heaven. So the bull is the main story here. And Ham was called the bull from heaven. Remember, Ham was against the god of Noah. The unseen god was compared to the sun by the early Egyptians, as the sun was the most powerful in the universe. Imagine you in those days, step into their shoes. You had no TV, no newspapers, no internet, and you had to believe what you see. When you got up in the morning, the first thing you seen was the sun, how powerful it was. It lit up everything. Those days, people were mesmerized by seeing the sun come up in time, go down in time, and they thought it was a god, basically. The first dynasty pharaohs were called Namar. Now, Namar is supposed to be Mizraim. Now, I will show you in my next slide who was Namar, whose ancestors was the Scorpion king. Now, Egyptologists has already agreed that the first dynasty of the pharaohs and the first pharaoh was the Scorpion king. We don't have any information on the Scorpion king, but we do have some artifacts which were dug up from Egypt, which shows the Scorpion king. But the first written pharaoh was Namar. Namar is probably Mizraim. This
Is
may
it
have been Mizraim. Pardon?
right?
Yeah.
Glady, is it before the Pharaoh's time, this one?
No. Pharaohs, you have to understand there were 18 dynasties of the pharaoh. This I'm talking of the first dynasty. So you're
Yeah,
talking
because
somewhere between
yeah,
2500, 2800 years. BC.
BC, right?
BC.
Yeah,
These are
because
all before.
Pharaohs, they have history like 3000 BC, right? Like
Yeah. The earliest was close to 2800. I don't think 3000 because that's where the flood happened. So they were close to about
okay.
2800 BC. And this is, I'm talking of the first dynasty of the pharaohs. It was called the Scorpion King. You can Google that, but there is no history. But I'll show you a picture of the Scorpion King's tablet. Egypt is called Mestriam by the Hebrews. And Mestriam lived not long after the flood. For after the flood, Chum. Now the word Chum in Hebrew is Ham. They used to call it, the word C is silent, Cham, Ham. The son of Noah, he begat Expetus or Mestram. You see, they call them with different names, but Mestram is Mizraim, who was the first to set out to establish himself in Egypt at the time when the tribes began to disperse their way. Now, the whole time from Adam to the flood was, according to the Hebrews, 2,242 years. Others say it is 1,650 years. But that's a matter of contention as to when the flood really happened, because many say that after creation, 1,650 years after the creation, God destroys the earth. But some says it was basically a different date. So that we can never know which is exact. The Scorpion King is a name that may refer to multiple kings in ancient Egypt, including the Scorpion King I. This is what historians are saying. Scorpion may be a title and not a king. The Scorpion name may be for King Namar. King Namar is Mizraim. And because there is another king called Scorpion too. So I'll go to the rest. I have put in a thing here, a link. You can go to that link, and basically this link will take you to a page which basically explains to you that the ancient people were giants. Now remember the first picture which I showed you of Adam, Noah, and his sons. Okay, they were getting smaller and smaller, but they were still giants at the time when the first Egyptians were ruling. That's the reason and the secret of why so huge stones were put on those pyramids, which today even no scientist or no archaeologist can explain as to why how those huge stones went up that pyramids. It's because they were giants in those times. They were the giants. The pharaohs were giants. Now this is a slide on Namar. Namar is also known as Meneses. And this is the famous jar which is there in, I think this is in the Egyptian Museum or the Cairo Museum. You see here this man standing, this is Namar. Namar is the Egyptian paganized memory of Adam, they say. Atum is the Egyptian name. Ham is most probably Horus, the sun god. Ham is this is all what I read to you. Here is depicted as the bulls from heaven. You can see the bulls here at the top. This is very sacred to them. They are the bulls from heaven, which is Ham. Implies Ham, and this is Mizraim, the son of Ham. Basically, he's shown trying to cut off a person's head, and his servant is waiting with the bag here. And this is basically the sign of the Egyptians, first where the eagle stands with the bow, and these are the arrows in the bow. The eagle is giving one bow to the pharaoh, basically. And here the back side of the jar shows an animal which looks very similar to a Diplodocus, which is a dinosaur which has died. So maybe during the time of the first Egyptians, these animals did exist after the flood, but they might have died off because this is there on this jar. If they had not seen this animal, they would have not put it on the jar. They have seen something. And here on the right side, you could see Namar, but you can see a scorpion here at the right. This is the sign of the Scorpion King. So either there was a different king dynasty called Scorpion's King, or Scorpion was a title for Namar. But we don't know clearly. But here is the sign of the scorpion for Menezes, Namar. Namar is the second son of, the son of Cush and of Canaan, I mean, sorry. And here I give again the 11 names. Atum, Shut, Tefnut, Gebjis. If you put Adam to Ham from the Bible, they will all match up here. These are the 11 gods which the Egyptians worship, basically. Okay, this is another form of how God took the form of gods coming from the sea. Remember in my previous slide, I had said that Noah and his sons came from the sea after the flood, and then they refilled the earth. Now, after a generation of 500 to 1,000 years, they forgot the stories of Noah, and most of the stories were what do you call, like Chinese whisper. It was all infiltrated with tales which were told over the fire and all that. And I have to believe that there were some demons and spirits, which is called Satan, had come in the form of some beings which basically try to, separate us from Yahweh, the God. And that is the sign, like this, you have Dagon. He's a god from the sea. He basically comes from the sea. The Greeks had a god from the sea called Scylla. I don't know how I pronounce it. The Indians had the water god called Varuna, and they had the god called Matsya. Their famous god is Agastya. You can see he's got a tail here. This photograph, the Hindu religions don't show you much because this is the real depiction of Agastya. On the left, they would like to show you this manly figure where he's a proper human being. But the real picture of Agastya is this one at the right, where you see a very devilish type of person with a tail rounding his hand, and he's got scales around his leg. If you see very carefully, his leg has scales. How the fish has scales, the leg has scales. So this is the real Agastya. In Hindu scriptures, Agastya is supposed to be the one who taught language to the Indians. That means he gave all the languages. He too comes from the sea. The Greeks also had another god, which is a famous god called Poseidon. And there's a lot of stories about how Poseidon, even there was a famous movie too about Poseidon. Here I say after the flood, like I mentioned in my previous presentation, Noah and his sons became gods since the generation knew that they came out of the sea, and they started worshipping them on later generation by various interpretations. That means the stories of Noah were taken and then spun into new stories, and they created all these stories around it and created these gods around it. Basically, just like when you do not have a whole story, and you're in those days sitting across fire, an old person telling stories to the whole village, imagine how many lies he'll cook up and he'll tell. That was how religion basically spread, and that's how my 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 channel and my book, which I will write, is also called Banyan Wines. That means everything comes from the root and how it spread, the lies spread, and how religion also spread like that. And this is how most of the religions spread. And here I cover how Noah and his children are gods in Greek mythology. Uranus, I said in my chapter, Uranus, who he was. Lepidus is Japheth. Uranus, one of his sons, was named Lepidus. This is an exact equivalent of the name Japheth, since Lepidus was the forefather of humanity in Greek mythology. This provides even more reason for associating him with Noah's son Japheth, the forefather of the Greeks. Now, there is a story of Deucalion, of how he survives the flood. And here you see this statue is there in Greece or somewhere. It is there, the statue. These two are Cronus and Rhea. They birthed the 6 original gods. And here you see them throwing stones at the back. Every stone the woman threw became a woman, became a girl child, and a stone which the man threw behind his shoulder became a male child. And according to the Greek mythology, this is how they filled the earth. You can go and read the story of Deucalion, of how after the flood, Deucalion and his wife basically by throwing stones behind their back created children. Here I write about most of the Greek gods. You can go through it. Here it is, they say that Deucalion constructed an ark in which, according to one version, he and his wife rode out of the flood and landed on Mount Parnassus. Now, if you look at this story, you'll see the resemblance of the story of the flood, basically. They took these stories. Like I said, the story of the flood is there in 150 countries. In different countries, Noah is called with different names. Here I give some, here they said the couple correctly interpreted this, but to mean that they should throw stones on the hillside, Mother Earth, and they did so. Those stones thrown by Deucalion became men, and those thrown by Pyria, his wife's name was Pyria, became women. This is the Greek version. Hermes is a Greek writer, told the couple directly to cast stones behind them. Now, Cronus, remember who's Cronus? Cronus was Ham. Cronus was the king of the Titans. Remember the movie called The Battle of the Titans? Now, that is not a story which was cooked up. That is a mythological war between the giants. Like I said, in those days, they were giants. They still did not become 6 feet. They were still 14, 15 feet. And there was a huge war between the sons of Noah and his other sons who were against God. And that was called the Clash of the Titans. And also there were the other giants who were the bad blood of the fallen entities, which I told and covered in my first presentation. What do you call the fallen angels mated with the woman, the daughters of men, and the Nephilims were there. So there were after the flood, somewhat the Nephilim genes passed on. Many people ask, if God destroyed the giants and the Nephilims before the flood, how did they survive after the flood? Remember, there were 8 people on the ship. 4 people go. You can see clearly that they had pure blood because it was Noah and his kids. But there were 4 women on that ship, and those 4 women were wives taken on the last year before the flood, except for Noah's wife. One of them could have carried the bad blood or the genes of the Nephilims and taken it to after the flood. That is one possibility. There are 1-2 possibilities, but I believe this is the main possibility. Okay, here we have Noah and his sons in Mesopotamia. Now, Ashur is the son of Shem, I think. Yeah, I think he's the Shem's son. He is the god of the Sumerians and the Akkadians. The Sumerian god was later worshipped as Azura Mazda, also called as Marduk of Babylon. Now, Ashur was worshipped by the Sumerians way before Zoroastrianism came up, way before. I'll show you a picture of it. The same picture of Ashur is literally because Ashur is shown with a bow and arrow. Later on, that image is changed when in 600 BC, when Zoroaster basically formed the new religion called Zoroastrianism. And the same god Ashur was called Ahura Mazda, the god of Zoroastrians. And Shamshi Adad, you see, this is many of you will not know this name. Shamshi Adad is a king in Sumeria. He is listed down on the king's list. It's a block of stone which has the name of all the kings of Sumeria right from the start of Kish and before the flood. And I did mention to you and showed a picture of that before. It is there in the British Museum. I wanted to buy a copy of that so that I keep it with me. You get a copy, but they're selling it too expensive. It's called the King's List of Sumeria. Shamshad Adad was one of the kings on that list. His inscription equating the Ashur temple as the temple of Enlil. Now, who's Enlil? Enlil is the god in the story of Gilgamesh, the tablets of Gilgamesh, 12 tablets of Gilgamesh, as commonly being interpreted to be the first reference to an equation between Ashur and Enlil. That statement says that Enlil is the same god as Ashur, but I don't know, it's all confusing because they used to worship same gods with different names. But this is in principle how Noah's kids, Ashur, becomes a god in Mesopotamia. Here's Noah, children of God in Persia, Ashur, and you see there at the top here, this on the right hand side, you see this is Ashur with the bow and arrow. Now, this is not the Zoroastrian god. But if you look at the new principle, they have cut it down. The Zoroaster is half this. That means the bottom part is not there. He doesn't have the bow. He's standing with a circle in the Zoroastrian. But this is actually the Sumerian god. And on the left side, if you see Ashur worshipped here, this is the tree of life. They gave a great importance to the tree of life because they did not know the full story of the tree of life. In every religion, you will see this tree of life being shown. But after 1,000 years after Noah's flood, people basically lost the real story of the God of Yahweh, of God of Noah, and what was the meaning of the tree of life. But this is the depiction of the Sumerians showing the tree of life, basically. And this is Ashur. Ashur was the grandson of Noah. They made him a god there in Persia. Here I say the Ashur deities. Assyrians use the word Allah when referring to God. Now you can come to know from here, Allah, how the word Allah came. Basically, it's a long, what do you call, generations were called God as Allah, Allah. Finally, in the 6th, 7th century, they made it Allah. This word, before Allah, it was called El by the early Jewish, El for Elohim. God was called with those names. But in Jewish terms, why do they split it in two words? Do anyone know why do you split God's name in two words? According to the Jewish culture, you cannot take the holy name of God in one word. You have to take it in two words. Al-Aha, Yahweh. Yah is one word, Ve is another word, Yahweh. It is impolite and it is blasphemy to take God's name in one word, according to the Jewish tradition. That's the reason you split it in two. See, Ashur, the eldest son, and heir to Marduk. Marduk was his son. Here I cover how the sons of Noah basically became the Smors and the Gauls. I don't know if everyone knows who are the Smors and the Gauls. The Gauls were also the people of England. Basically, they were the tribes who were the early invaders of England. What we call the 5 kings of Samothia. England was not known as England in those days. It was called as Samothia. mean, Samothia was also a descendant of Gomer. Now, Gomer was the eldest son of Japheth. The, the name Germany comes from Gomer. Gomer's descendants basically filled most of Europe. One of his son called Magus, he formed Persia, the Magi of Persia. This word Magi, when Jesus was born, remember there's a story that three wise men, the Magis, came to give gifts to Jesus. They are basically the people from here, the Magis of Persia. That's why the name Magi comes from Magus, one of the descendants of Gomer. These were the children of Gomer, and I have given what they have done and how they formed. The Druids is the tribes which were the early invaders in Samothia, that is England. They were the one who crossed across from Europe into UK. At that time, maybe we don't know, but at that time the sea levels were low, and UK was connected to the mainland of France. So they may not been a sea which separated them. So they just walked across, or they might have even gone by boats, because boat building was known to man, because Noah came in, escaped in a boat. See, here it says, in one place it says that they arrived 200 years after the flood into the Samothrace. In another place in volume 4, it gives the date of the flood as 1650 AM. AM is Anno Mundi, the year of the flood. That's another way of saying BC and AD. Anno Mundi is before the flood. Going back to volume 1, now when I'm saying this volume, this is from this book, The First Five Kings of Samothia. Is that when it says volume, it's from this book. And I will list down the books in the last. We have the arrivals of the Samothians in 910 AM, which is 260 years after the flood. Without getting bogged down with the details, we get the impression that the dispersion was not a gradual process. People traveled large distances in a very short time, probably to get away from Nimrod, who had become a tyrant. Josephus, the writer of the first century, says that the Gauls are descended from Gomer, the eldest son of Japheth. Using a number of sources, say that they arrived in Britain about 300 years after the flood. Samothrace Mesches, this is his name. Mesches is thought to have been so named because he was the Saturn. Remember in that list, Saturn was the original founder of the kingdom, although this is a pagan practice of which he would disapprove. And I did tell you that Mesechi or Mariachi is used in India for any foreign people. This word is still used in the Hindu scriptures. Now I'm talking about China. China has a huge subject. I can make a full new presentation on this, but at a later stage. But the grandson of Ham, Sin, the grandson of Ham and the son of Canaan, were the initial people who basically went into China. Yahweh was called as Shangdi. I want to show you right at the bottom of the screen, you see. Buddhism came into China after 600 BC. Confucius formed his religion between 700 to 900 BC. Christianity came very late into China because missionaries were not allowed, they were killed. They came only between the 1800 AD. But what was there? What were the Chinese believing before 600 BC, before Buddhism? That's a question mark. You see, they were basically believing in one God, which is called Shangdi. And here the Chinese are the descendants of these original Sinites. They were called Sinites, and most called themselves Han. Han was from the name Ham, one of Noah's three sons. China is in ancient time was called the land of the Sinites. The name is still used, and the Bible even calls the distant land of the Sinim. In Isaiah 49:12, you see below, behold, these shall come from far and low, these from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim. Basically, Sinim versus Sinites. That's why we even today call the Indo-China War, the Indo-Sino War, the Sino-Japanese War. The word Sino means it comes from Sin, the grandson of Ham. Not all people in China are Sinite, though. There are several people groups that made it to China. One group, the Mao people, which are the ancestry to Noah's son Japheth and his son Gomer. You see here how we today also we call it the Sino-Japanese War, Sinology, the study of Chinese history. The name Sin is frequently encoded in Chinese names in the form of Siang or equivalent. Remember, China in olden time was called Sian. The two sons of Canaan, Heth, they were called the Hittites, and the Kitei, they call the Cathay. Chinese are also called as the Cathay people. You have the Cathay Pacific. Hong Kong has Cathay Pacific as its class. The word Cathay comes from the tribe of Cathay. And Sin is the other son. We call the Sinites. They were also called Sinim, which we call today modern China, are most likely to have become ancestors of the Oriental people. In Hebrew, we call them Semi. Portuguese used to call them Sinians. Noah was called Fushi in China. And I did tell you this story during the flood presentation. He was called Fushi. Ptolemy in the first century, he's a first century geographer, also claims in his writing the land of Shino Mo Sinai as China. This is what Ptolemy, he was a great geographer and what do you call it? Cartographer. That means you make maps of the places. He called that area as Shino Mo Sinai as China. And on the right, that picture is the called as the oracle bones. These are the oldest artifacts found in China. And they all had a different language on them. It was the Chinese language, but they were all dated to almost 2500 to 2800 BC. Remember, this can be dated because it's an organic thing. These are bones. They lived one time. And to the left, I show this is the what the Chinese call as God. Even today, there is a temple in Shanghai. Remember, the word Shanghai also comes from Shang. Shang is the word for God, Yahweh. Di means holy, the Holy One. There is a temple even today in Shanghai, which they worship for Shangdi. If you go to Shanghai, you will see it. Most of the cities in China are starting with the word Shang. Shanghai and I just can't remember, but many of them are there. Now, Noah's sons as gods in Libya. I had mentioned this before, Ammon, Hammond. These were all in Libya. One of his son of Canaan was now called Put. Put forms Libya. And here I just give information about how Dionysus. Here I give Uranus is Noah, Tatia is wife of Noah, Cronus is Ham, Ammon is Hammond, Rhea, the first wife, Dionysus, the son of Hammond, Zeus is Mizraim, the grandson of Hamath. And remember Hercules? We have all heard of Hercules holding the earth on his head, the Hercules cycle and all that. Hercules was the son of Mizraim. Rhea, the daughter of Gaia, defied earth. India called her Gaia, Gayatri. These things I'll leave it for you to read. Okay, some of the books which are referred for this are the Egyptian history of Manetho. Now, Manetho was a priest during the, I think, the 18th dynasty or the 17th dynasty or something. He was the priest and he was also a historian. So he has written a book, and of course, those books were translated many times. And he has written about the early history of Egypt and all that. He writes about how Noah's sons became the first rulers of Egypt and all that. Then you have Setius of Cnidus. Setius' writing also is not available today because they were all destroyed during the burning of the Alexandria library and all that. But there were some copies and some things which Diodorus did copy, the Greek historian, the third one, and he puts it in the Babylica Historica Diodorus. This is a great book if you want to read the history of Greek, because he takes a lot of things from Setius, and Setius and Diodorus mentions about Semiramis and Dionysus' invasion of India. Berosus is also another Greek historian. He writes the history of Babylon. So he calls it the Babylonica, the history of Babylonia. Then you have the Book of Jubilees, which have taken something. Here we have the Horatian Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland, 6-volume book. This is where I get the information from England or Samoris. Then you have Josephus. He's a first century, a great famous writer. He has about 12 volumes of books. He writes about everything and everything about the Jews. You have another book called The Table of Nations, which describes how Noah's sons went across. And there is a Chinese book called Faith of Our Fathers, written by Chan. He writes about the early history of China. I'll just go that the next presentation I'll have to do it individually because there's a lot of information which I cannot cover all of them in one time. I have to take one as a subject. I will explain how the Naga dynasty came into India, how the pagan worship started, who were the original Nagas, and from where did they come? The Nagash from Sudan, Ethiopia. It's very interesting to know how did the Naga dynasty come into India? Who are the Nagas? Then about Jainism, a short I'll try to cover Jainism in a very short period time because you can't get a lot of information on Jainism, but there is some connectivity with Jainism to Rishabhadeva. They have 17 Tirthankaras, and Rishabhadeva is supposed to be the first Tirthankara, and that's supposed to be Noah. Basically, they're taking all these stories are being taken and made into this. You have Buddhism. Now, Buddhism also have 27 Buddhas. Many people who hear Buddhism, they think Buddha is only one. Buddha is supposed to be the 27th Buddha, and they are supposed to, like we have Jesus will come on the final day. Even Buddhism, they have a story that they will come the last Buddha. But Buddha is not the first Buddha. There were 27 Buddhas before. Ashoka's pillar has 7 Buddhas mentioned on this. So there's a lot of information on Buddha, how Buddhism spread between so many sects, and how the birth of Hinduism started, basically. Everything started after Buddhism. Zoroastrianism, how it came into India, how it started in near Bactria, and how also this played a great important role in fire worship, and your yagnas and all that is basically a copy from Zoroastrianism, which the Sanatan Dharma has taken, basically. Many things from Zoroastrianism were taken into Hinduism. Christianity comes in 52 AD in India. I can talk a little brief of that, of St. Thomas. Islam comes in the 10th century, basically after Muhammad bin Qasim coming here. He didn't bring Islam, but he was the first to invade India, Muhammad bin Qasim. Though he was the son-in-law of Hajjaj, who was the general for Abdul Malik. Abdul Malik, the guy who built the Dome of the Rock. So Hajjaj's son-in-law was Muhammad bin Qasim, who invades Sindh. Then I will talk last about Hinduism, Sanatism. This is very interesting and a lot of information in this. I cover it between 800 AD to 1400 AD. This is the period between this religion was really formed. The Vaishnavism and the Shivaism with Shankaracharya and Manucharya and all that. I'll cover this later. This is just I wanted to say our ancestors and forefathers were aware of each other's religion, stories, and culture by trade and travel. What I mean to say in this is every nation knew the other nation's religion, and that's how everything was copied. And that's it, folks, for the presentation. Any questions? I hope I didn't take more than an hour, did we? Oh, it's almost.
Yeah, it's good. Great information, Glady. Nice. Very
Yeah, I
informative.
try to keep there's a lot of information, so I try to keep it very short and sweet, but still, you see, for people to understand, you have to cover a little bit, and I try to do that best on that. Hey, hi, Ravi. I see you joined. Nice seeing you after a long time, Ravi.
Yeah, you can stop sharing, then we can put the camera on. Yeah.
Good. I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Okay. So, folks, if anyone don't have anything, hey, did you record this? Oh, I did record it. Correct. I did record it.
You can
Okay.
stop. You can
Pardon?
stop record. You can
Yeah.
stop record.